Morning, everyone. Happy to be here this morning with, this is my little Mustang. Her name is Zara. She is a 7-year-old Mustang from Sulphur Springs, Utah. With that, we have some Mustang fans out there? All right. Yeah. So I'm just going to let her walk around a little bit here while we get started. She's hasn't gotten in here yet to see all the sights. She's my she is 7 years old. I've had her for 3 years, but she's the quickest of my horses to go to the back burner when my life gets busy, so she's not as advanced as my other horses. So I wanted to bring her in this morning and talk about some of the foundational stages to my program. As you heard, we're going to talk about liberty work. That's a very broad term that can mean a lot of different things to different people. Okay, and so to me, you know, we have, at the most basic element, liberty means there are no restraints on our horse. Okay, so there's no physical restraint on them, holding them with us. But there's a lot more that goes into defining that, in my opinion, beyond that. For example, I have people that come up here and they're like, well, to me, liberty is we turn the horse loose and they go tearing around and we just hope we can get it back again. Okay. That's not really what I would consider liberty work. To me, I want there to be a continuous exchange back and forth as we are working. I'm communicating with them, they're communicating with me, we're reading each other, and there is still a high degree of discipline and communication. Now, within that, we still have some different styles. We have when I do want my horses to have a lot of freedom and choice and ability to express themselves, but I also personally, what I do is performance liberty. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out and perform with your horse or even compete with your horse, but I use the term performance liberty because I want my horses to be, even though they are at liberty or at freedom, I want to get to where we have a high degree of mental and physical discipline. So we have a lot of focus, a lot of emotional control to where we can go through a large range of emotions, high energy, low energy, get their adrenaline up, be able to put them under a pretty significant amount of pressure, like horses in a high-level performance discipline, let's say reining or dressage, some of those disciplines would need to be able to work under, okay? And then as far as the physical discipline, I want to get to where we have a high level of athleticism, where my horses are learning how to use themselves in a healthy, balanced, biomechanically correct way, even though we don't have maybe physical age on them, okay? And that can then transfer directly over into the ridden work. When I get on their back, I have a lot of my groundwork cues can transfer over, and they also develop a high level of muscle memory. By building up to doing this at liberty, they get a lot of muscle memory to where when I get on their back, it becomes almost automatic for them because they don't have to necessarily think about it. It's automatic. That's where they want to go to. So when I teach Liberty clinics all year. I get all different types of breeds, ages, horses, different types of people. And one thing I run into when I'm teaching liberty work is there has to be a balance between relationship versus technique. And I find sometimes people think it's more of one or more of the other. And to me, one of the cool things, one of the beautiful things about liberty work is you have to have a certain level of relationship because you can't just get in there and make everything happen, okay? They will leave, and if we don't have a respectful dialogue back and forth. But there is also a balance between if somebody comes to the clinic with me and they want me to take their horse and do something, I have quite a bit of technique. I've been doing this for a while, but I don't have time to build a really solid relationship with that horse in an hour or even, a week. Let's say if somebody's at my place for a week-long clinic. And so there has to be, if you spend all the time in the world with your horse, but you don't have a certain level of technique, you're only going to get so far. But if you have all the technique in the world and you don't take the time to build a relationship, and it's not coming from a place of trying to build that connection and help your horse, you're also only going to get so far. And then as we move into, how do we build that? How do we expand on that? We can talk about ways that we're going to reward or reinforce our horses. We have different behaviors we're trying to teach and train and build. How are we going to reinforce them? They need to have what's in it for them, okay? Why should they participate? So we have positive reinforcement and we have negative reinforcement. There are the two kind of types. It's a very broad range of category, but we can have, most traditionally in the horse world, people are more familiar with negative reinforcement, or what's more familiar to people call pressure and release. Okay, but as far as defining, negative reinforcement, it doesn't mean negative is bad, positive is good. Negative simply means to reinforce what we're asking of our horses. We are taking some type of aversive stimulus, is the big term for it. Basically, something the horse doesn't particularly desire. That's what we're calling pressure, something that is anywhere from mildly unpleasant or annoying all the way up to quite uncomfortable. There can be a big range in it, but we're taking that out of the equation to reward the horse for what we're asking for. And so they seek to get that stimulus or that pressure to go away, and they will find release. Now, it's very effective because it is a very natural way that horses communicate with each other as far as the way they use body language, nips, bites, kicks. They will drive each other around in a herd situation, so it makes a lot of sense to horses. And the release is immediate. As soon as that pressure, if your timing is good, as soon as that pressure goes away, your horse knows that is what you were asking for in that moment. Because horses are all looking for comfort, just like we as humans are looking for comfort. And I think of it as they're looking for peace and quiet. So the more places I can give my horse peace and quiet, not necessarily just when does the pressure leave, but when can I give them peace and quiet with me? Okay, now that can be physically peace and quiet where the pressure isn't here anymore, but it can also be, how can I help them come back to a state of connection, focus, and relaxation here with me, regardless of what's going on around us, okay? Now, if we want to talk about positive reinforcement, that means we're again, if we want to get into kind of the technical term or scientific term, we are, to reinforce what we're asking for, we are adding in an appetitive stimulus, which means we're adding in something the horse desires to reward them for what they're doing, rather than taking something away the horse doesn't particularly desire. Sorry, step up. So one of the ways that starts is with a food reward. Food is one of the most inherently primary reinforcers that we can use, meaning in and of itself, food reinforces our horses. They need food to survive. That's going to be something that's going to be reinforcing for them if they feel safe in what we're doing. If they don't feel safe, if you think you're having a fight for your life, there's no point in stopping to eat. Okay, so they need to feel safe first. And then we can, so one of the common ways this is used, you might have heard of clicker training, some of you. And when we talk about clicker training, we'll talk about that a lot more tomorrow, in my clinic tomorrow. I'm not going to get in depth into that today. You will hear me or see me using some of it when I make a popping sound with my tongue, and you might see me giving a few food rewards with Zara here. But that's something I'll get more into later. But I don't incorporate much of that in the very beginning stages. I want a really solid foundation of basic body control and an understanding of pressure, okay? And so once we get into some higher level things, I can start to bring the clicker training or the positive reinforcement into play. And by the way, food is not the only form of positive reinforcement. Anything the horse desires, we can use. So that can be scratches, rubs, pats, verbal praise. My horses learn to enjoy verbal praise because of what they associate it with. And so that becomes reinforcing. But I like to build the clicker training in later when we're getting to higher level things, because now I have double the reinforcement. Instead of just releasing pressure, I can add in the food reward. But I don't want to get too much into that in the beginning, because if they get such a high level of reinforcement for really basic level effort, and then I want to get to higher level things, they can kind of be like, well, now wait a minute, like you started giving me a bonus from day one of work here, and now we're how many months in, and you expect twice or three times the amount of work for the same level of bonus. That's not a bonus anymore, right? Nobody would like that at your job. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is it does make things more complicated. Anytime we add another level of reinforcement into the equation, there's another dynamic to work through. So all that to just give a little bit of background. When you see me working out here, I will be incorporating both of those into what we're doing. So in the beginning, when I have somebody comes to a clinic with me, and we're, where are we kind of getting a baseline and starting from? Well, as I mentioned a little bit ago, I want connection, focus, and relaxation. And then I'm going to move into basic body control. So this is, to me, where the relationship and technique kind of start to have a dance between the two. So connection, focus, and relaxation. Some of that's going to involve ways that I'm going to show my horse that I see if they're distracted, nervous, upset, any of those types of things, and then showing them how to come back to a better state. But then also body control is going to get into the technique. Like, where's the mechanics of how we're operating here? Can I move your hind quarter? Can I move your shoulder? Can I ask for backward movement? Can I ask for forward movement? Just like when we're riding, we have to be able to steer and guide and communicate where we're planning to go. So one of the most simple ways that we can start with this, now she's pretty focused. She was just looking around a second ago. So right there, one of the most simple ways is I like to stand, if I'm not here in front of them, if she's looking off down there, I'll go the opposite way. If they get distracted and go, because if their mind starts to leave, it's only a matter of time before their body leaves, okay? Their eye goes, their mind goes, and then their body and their feet go. And so many times I see people wait until the feet are leaving. The horse is anxious and distracted, and they're like, how do I fix this? Whereas if I can catch it right as soon as the eye or the mind starts to go, I can redirect that before it's nearly as big of an issue to work through. And it also starts to show my horse, because if I'm expecting them to stay focused and attentive to me, in my opinion, it's only fair that I'm focused and attentive on them. And so if they start to realize, wow, like you notice when my ear flicks one way, you notice when my eye goes one way, you notice when those little things, I am asking them to come back and focus on me, but I'm first saying I notice everything you're aware of, which tells them if I'm that attentive to those little things, I'm probably pretty aware of everything else going on. The only way I can be trusted to be focused on and listened to is if I'm aware of and keeping them safe, because they think they've got to do it if I'm not going to do it, okay? So I've got to demonstrate that I'm aware of myself first, aware of them, and aware of the environment. That's a big thing I see when people come to clinics. They're so worried about their horse paying attention to them, and they don't even know what their own body and mind is doing, okay? They're thinking about a million other things in their mind often. They don't know what their arm is doing, what their feet are doing, what their hands are doing, what their lips are doing. Okay, I do have two whips here. Whips are going to be an extension of my arm. They're going to make me longer. They're going to give me more reach. I can be more accurate, and I can apply different types of pressure to my horse with these whips. And one thing I found, just like when you're riding, your tack and your equipment does make a difference. I've used a lot of different types of whips over the years, and I find if you have a really clunky, heavy stick or a really light, snappy whip, either of those cause problems. Your arms get fatigued with a heavy, stiff tool, or you send a lot of mixed signals when your whip is jumping all over. Okay, so I'm using, these whips are handmade for me by Fleck Whips over in Germany. It's a family-owned company that makes these to my specs, and they're made to be, I want my communication with these horses to be fluid and subtle, and so I want a little bit of a flex or a wave in these whips if I use them, but I want them to be balanced in my hand and go still when I stop using them. She randomly finds things in the sky to look at. All right. It's kind of cute when she does it, but I want to help her come back to present here. So as we, one of the basic, after we start to get that, again, this looks like a super basic exercise, but this is something I will put into practice anytime I'm somewhere. In the beginning, you're going to have to do this frequently, and I might have to, in the beginning, I might have to walk, if she's over there looking at you guys, I might have to walk all the way around here, but I go first to my body language, my head, my feet, my arm, and my whip. Then I'll go back to her body if she ignores all of that, but I'm not going straight to her. One of the big things if you're trying to work out to liberty work, your horse has to learn how to come find you. You can't be constantly going to catch and chase your horse, okay? And so this is one of the basic elements here where they start to learn, if she goes over there, I'm not going to go grab her, and I'm not going to go straight to pulling on that rope. If we go straight to pulling on that rope every time, we're going to have to keep going and pulling on that rope versus using our body language to bring them back. And once we get some of that going, I want to get into, like I said, some of the body control. One of the first things I want to actually do is teach my horse how to back away from me and yield laterally or sideways around me and bring spatial awareness from them of, hey, look, no matter what we're doing, I never want you to crowd in on top of me, okay? This is, if I make an exception to this, very rarely, it's going to be a horse who is genuinely scared of humans. Okay, maybe they're not, maybe they were wild, maybe for whatever reason they've got trauma from the past. I might work on inviting them towards me first, but far more frequently, any horses I work with that come to clinics are going to be actually horses who have learned to run over humans, run away from humans, and that's not the horse's fault, it's because the humans have not been consistent in their field and their communication for where that horse is expected to operate, okay? But a useful thing for starting here is teaching them to back away. I do, when people think about liberty work, they often think about drawing the horse toward them, bringing them closer, and I want to do a lot of that later on. But to start off here, if I step in towards her, wake her up a little bit. If I step in, I got to steer so we don't hit the fence. If I step in towards her and my body kind of gets big, step her away from the fence. And my body gets big, my lips come up, I want her to back away. Now, it should take very little, if any, pressure at this point to get her to back up. In the beginning, I'm going to use a scooping motion with these whips. One of the biggest things, not just in liberty work, but any horsemanship, but here if we're talking about specific application, with your whips, rhythm and consistency is huge for your horse learning what you're asking them to do, okay? If we get really snappy and irregular with our body language and our whips, it's going to be hard for them to read our cue, okay? And so even if I have to put pressure on my horse, I want it to be rhythmic and I want them to know it's coming. So if I use a scooping motion here towards her chest, I'm going to be asking her to back up. A lot of times people are used to backing their horse up by shaking the lead rope. Okay, how many of you have done or been taught to back your horse up that way? Okay, all right, a lot of you. If I have a horse who's about to, like, say, mow me down and run me over, like, sure, I'll do that to stay safe. But we shouldn't be living there for long, in my opinion. I don't want to have to be constantly going to that. One, that's a pretty basic form of communication, in my opinion, and we should be trying to advance. But two, by far the vast majority of horses that I see who are taught to back up that way tend to be fractious and kind of evasive in the backup. Their head goes up, their back hollows out, and they're kind of tense as they do it. The backup is a huge tool for me. Tomorrow I'm going to talk more about getting into posture training and collection at Liberty, teaching my horses how to use themselves. The backup is a huge tool for me for showing them how to rebalance and shift their weight onto their hindquarter. So if that's going to be the case, I need the backup to be a place of relaxation and comfort and something they're looking to go to, and it physically has to be a balanced maneuver for them, okay? So instead of going to the other reason is if I'm going to the rope to back them up, what happens when the rope is gone? I lose my backup because I don't have that cue. I can't reinforce that cue. So if I'm using the whip towards her chest here, for straight. All right. So there's a good example, because your horse is going to be crooked in the beginning when you go to back them up. I don't want to go chase her if she's going off that way. I'll catch her, and I'll bring her back this way. Then we'll go to the backup. So I might walk with my whip, but I want to lead good where I want her to go with my body. So like here, I might see if I can steer around the end of the arena here. Right there, she started offering a little more speed. She started bending in an arc on the track of that circle. I didn't specifically ask for that. That's an example of where I can have that click and treat and say that was like extra effort there. I'm going to reward that. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But notice as I'm backing her here, I'm sending her shoulder slightly to my left, which brings her hip to my right. Now, if I straighten my body, very good. If I straighten my body, she should straighten. But so many times, and this applies to riding her on the ground, when it's really visible on the ground, we go into the backup, which again is super important for physical safety and personal space, and for teaching your horses how to balance. People are backing, and the horse gets crooked inevitably, and they see what's most visible. The hip starts to get crooked. So in this case, let's say I'm backing, and the hip starts to go that way. People want to come over there and shove the hip back over. Okay, but a couple of things can happen. One, if I step this way, often I'll drive the shoulder into that direction, and I might actually kind of block them, but we lose the backup in the process of me pushing the hip over, okay, and they tend to kind of get their weight up on the forehand, versus if I steer the shoulder, I can influence the hip, and I can free up the shoulder. We want to transfer weight off of the front end onto the hindquarter. And so I think of it like backing a horse trailer, okay? You guys back your horse trailer, and you want to put the tail of that trailer over to a certain direction. You don't go back there and push the tail. You take the nose the opposite direction, which causes the tail to go the opposite direction, okay? So if I'm backing her here, and like right there, her hip came this way, so I'm going to come this way. Do you see her hip came back into line there, okay? And so a lot of times in the beginning when I'm working on the backup, horses might be kind of stiff in the front end and kind of stuck in the shoulder, because when she's backing, you can see she's pulling with her hindquarter, okay? She should not be pushing with her shoulder. Good girl. That's enough. I wasn't ready for that part just yet. So moving on, Zara. It's a little hard for her when I'm talking to you guys too, but that was something I was going to get to in a minute. But when I'm steering that shoulder, notice, girl, when I'm steering that shoulder, start to see how, like in this case, that right front starts to think about slightly crossing behind that left front. There, good. Okay? If those feet are crossing slightly, good. They're losing their brace. They can't push if they're here, okay? That means the hindquarter then has to start pushing, the shoulder starts to pick up, and we can carry that into that principle into a lot of other things down the road. The other thing I like about this backup exercise in the beginning is it makes it really clear how you can sequence your aids and your cues to get to where you're operating much more on body language, not so much on physical pressure. And you can refine those aids. And so with her, the reason when I step in, the reason she knows that means back up is just like we always hear about releasing physical pressure to report something with a horse. We also have to remember the same concept applies to releasing your body language or your energy or your implied pressure. Implied pressure versus physical pressure. And so if I want them to respond, just like a horse with good social skills in a herd doesn't have to go around kicking and screaming and biting. They use a little bit of implied pressure or energy, and the other horse responds. Same thing here. So if I want this to mean something, when I lean and step in towards her, I have to take that lean and that facing her away in the same moment I would release pressure. So I've got to turn away and take that off before her feet stop. So many times I see people complaining to me that the horse is lazy and stubborn and sticky, whereas in reality, they've consistently rewarded. They'll back their horse up. They'll wait till the horse stops moving their feet. Then they'll release their pressure. Well, if you released while their feet stop, you rewarded them for going nowhere versus releasing, getting out of there when you get more effort. Okay? It's a big thing to remember. And then lastly, in the back up here, like she was showing off a minute ago here, if I go still but I'm still facing her, she should maintain that as long as I'm in this position. Good girl. If I turn away, she can stop, or she can keep going because she's ambitious. Good. Zara. Yep. Zara. Wake up. Yep. She's in no hurry. Go ahead. Yep. Okay. So that's just something to be aware, again, because she's learned to find peace and comfort in that backup. Now, going into some lateral body control, I need to be able to steer the shoulders. I want to be able to back her up. I also want to be able beside her. When I'm talking what I call in-hand position, it would be as if I had a halter lead rope. I don't obviously have a rope, but if I'm in-hand position, I want their face at my shoulder. A lot of people think we want to be here. There's very rare times I want to be here. Depending on the horse's personality or their level of advancement, I might spend a little bit of time here. Mostly, I want them to learn to be here. If I'm back here, it's much harder to keep their focus. Their eyes are way out ahead of me, and I'm way back here. Okay, it's much easier for them to get distracted and leave me. It's much easier for them to step on me when I'm right here as we're trying to figure out this dance and who's going where. Okay, and it's much harder. A lot of my cues are going to be up here in front of the chest or at the shoulder. It's much harder to reach there if I'm all the way back here. Okay, so I want them to learn to be here, but I want to be able to back them up here off my body language. If I need to, I like to use just the handle of my whip when I'm here because I don't need the full length. Good. And I want to refine that to where we don't need a lot of pressure to maintain that. Sorry, come here. Wake up. Okay. So just briefly going over some of these basic elements. And again, this is what looks boring to a lot of people, but people come in and they want to do things like liberty circles, rear with their horse, liberty spin, cutting game, all these big flying lead changes, all these exciting things. But if we don't have understanding of the basic elements, none of that's ever going to happen. So if I want to go to back her up, I want to be able to yield her shoulder around her hind quarter without her hind quarter swinging out of place, because I want that weight on the hind quarter. Whichever feet are staying in place is where the majority of the weight is going. The other thing this exercise does is helps our horse really get a good understanding of drive versus draw, okay? How many of you have heard the terms drive and draw before? Raise your hands, okay? Maybe a few of you, maybe not, all right? So Those are kind of some big terms. But drive, I'm typically sending a part of the horse's body away from me. Draw, I'm bringing a part back to me. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is typically in a horse's mind, if I'm driving them, in a way, they are drawing me, depending on the essence of the exercise. But if I'm drawing them, in a way, they're driving me, okay? And so that's something you can pay attention to their expression as you're working. Sometimes you see expressions in them that look very much like when they're driving other herd members. Well, because in their mind, they're driving me as we're working at livery, okay? But when I'm talking about, again, this looks pretty basic, yielding the shoulder. But notice, as soon as I stop yielding, if I step back away, she should be able to draw back towards me. With any horse, especially a sensitive horse like her, that takes so much time to build. Anybody can come in kicking and screaming and shove a horse away from them, okay? But we can't get away with that. If you just come in and knock them away, they're like, all right, I get the picture, I'll leave. But they're going to get ahead of you. They're going to start anticipating in that turn. They're going to run forward. They're going to want to leave. So I need to be able to yield them, but I have to be very specific in how I'm breaking that. You know, at the beginning, that might be all I'm doing. I might just be asking for a shift, and then I might take that away again and slowly build that up. Now, obviously, I can go farther, but I've got to really break down how I'm building that up. Because so often what I see is somebody comes in and shoves him over, and then they yank him back with the rope because the horse starts to leave because they came in so loud and rushed it, okay? The other really helpful foundational exercise is what I call a boomerang yield. It's essentially a leg yield on a circle around me. So it teaches the horse how to move their shoulder and their hind quarter, bend through their body, and step around me. And I call it boomerang yield instead of, just a hind quarter yield because I'm focusing on the shoulder. Yield the hind quarter starts to plant. And if the shoulder plants, the weight gets on the forehand, and that's very difficult to teach them how to balance and be light on the front end. If we spend a lot of time teaching them to plant the front end, and they also start to push into us if we can't move that shoulder. So I call it boomerang yield because of the shape of a boomerang yield, that arched, kind of a C arc shape in a boomerang. That's what I'm looking for in her body, roughly. Say 40 degrees of bend in her neck, roughly. I want that inside hind to cross in front of the outside hind. I want that inside front to cross in front of the outside front. And I want her to understand she can yield to this inside whip, but she can also, this right whip here, carriage whip, with the shorter lash, I can be more technical, keep her from pushing into me, okay? So the whip does not always just mean go faster. It can mean bend and change the shape of your body and bring your focus onto me, okay? So one more time going the other way. If I lean to that side slightly, good. That's really nice. I'm going to be real quiet with the whip. Good. If I want to speed her up a little bit, I can. Good. Notice that steps that engages that inside hind leg. And again, this might look relatively basic, but for them to learn how to respond to that inside whip and change the shape of their body and not think that just means go faster or get away from me. Okay? Very good. The other thing, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I don't do a lot of so-called desensitizing. I don't love that term necessarily. I understand why we call it that. But I do need my horse to be able to differentiate when there's energy in my body behind the whip versus when that whip is not asking them to move anywhere. This causes environmental pressure. When the energy in the room comes up, and there's other energy happening that they can learn, they don't have to come out when there's environmental pressure coming up. So if I walk around her and make quite a bit of energy with this whip. I'm going to do more of this with a really sensitive horse, not as much of this with a little bit of a quieter, more dull horse. But I want her to be able to differentiate that. But I also want to be careful when I'm teaching that I don't just teach her not to move her feet, but be worried about it. I want to make sure she's relaxed around it. So that when my energy drops, or the other thing I'll do, I'll teach them if I come in and rub them with the whip, that's like my default stand and relax cue, okay? Because what can happen is you just breathe funny, and they're, boomerang yielding around you, or backing away from you, or yielding the shoulder. You need to be able to come back to a place of relaxed default. She's pretty relaxed. She's about to go to sleep on me, so let's wake her up here. Come. And get into a little bit more, coming back to the in-hand work. I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow as well. But one of the basic elements in the beginning, again, once I'm going offline, is I want my horse to learn to find my shoulder and stay at my shoulder, okay? And so I want them to learn if I put a little bit of pressure at their hind quarter with my back whip here, that should be asking them to yield their hind quarter a bit, bend through their body, bring their nose back towards me. And in the beginning, I'm going to be doing only inside turns. I'm not going to be stepping into them. This is where that draw comes into play. And I want them, when we're talking about, again, horsemanship in general, but especially with livery work, I want to be able to teach my horse where to find the sweet spot. Where's the sweet spot to hold yourself? And again, where are you going to find peace and quiet? And so in this case, that's going to be right here at my shoulder. And so the other thing that really helps me with this is what I call mirroring or matching footsteps with my horse, okay? And so it's a way of syncing up with their body, and it shows them, first of all, a question I get all the time when I talk about this is people ask me, am I matching the horse or is the horse matching me? And I say, well, both. In the beginning, I'm matching the horse. I'm matching the horse, and then when they start to notice I'm actually trying to sync up with them, then I'm going to start to ask them to match up with me. But it gives me a way to start influencing where do I want their feet to go. So my feet should influence their front feet. The other side note on this that I see a lot of times, how many of you have heard the term or been taught what it means to have an independent seat when you're riding? Raise your hand. Okay? So the other thing, when I'm working with this, and this is the key to a lot of the higher level things I'm going to be doing at Liberty with this mirroring work, but people have a really hard time actually, again, keeping track of what their body is doing. So I think about learning how to have independent feet, meaning with my footfalls or my steps. In the beginning, I'm teaching this, and they're going around doing this. You see how that kind of freaks her out? She's like, why are you looking at me all like that? Okay? But in the beginning, they're trying so hard to get timed up with their horse's feet. So over time, it should get to where that becomes muscle memory, okay? Where you can feel the rhythm of your horse beside you, even without staring down there at their feet, because the other thing to remember is your focus is a really powerful tool with your horse. My horse has learned to pay attention to where my focus is going and to respond accordingly. And so I don't want to be obsessing down here over their feet, just to stay in time with their feet, because later on when I bring my focus down there, it's going to mean something else. And so really, one thing I give people clinics is I say, go home in the evening and find a partner, a human partner, and practice matching your body and your footfall, your stride length, your speed to your horse, to your partner, so that you can come back to your horse and make their life easier, so you're not struggling so much to get in time with them. You can be more consistent, and they can match up to you. And that becomes muscle memory for you. There's other parts of your body and your energy and your communication that are going to be a lot more accessible because you can actually pay attention to those and you don't have to be thinking so hard about your feet. But as I'm going, if I want to draw her in, my shoulders should step away. So if I need to hit my gas pedal, that's going to be when the whip comes overhand. That's going to be to send her forward. Ask her to step forward. And just lots of little bits like that in the beginning. Little increase and then relax. Little increase and then relax. Little increase and then relax. Because if we always come back to a little bit of energy and then relax, we can build relaxation into energy and keep that really positive mental state. But the other thing, there's times my horse is going faster than I want, and I don't want to add more speed. I want to ask them to bend. If I can put a bend in their body, it tends to bring more focus, tends to help them soften physically, therefore help them soften mentally and relax. And so if I want to ask her to bend, I'm going to come sideways with my whip. See the difference in her body there. If I go to tap her hip here, go ahead. If I kind of stay on my circle, she should match me here on the circle. If I start to cross my feet in here, her feet should cross and come follow. Go ahead. But that's important. Just like when you're riding, your horse needs to be able to tell the difference when your legs mean go forward versus when your legs mean steer. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind. Go ahead. So again, ask her to speed up. Good. Turn. The other thing I want to be able to do in hand here, because I do want her to draw on my shoulder, but again, we can't have them drawing so hard that they're pushing into us and not regarding our space. And so I want to be able to let heel her. If I slightly start to cross my feet, and again, I bring this whip behind me, underhand, sideways, ask her to step out away from me. And that's really helpful for them to learn. I can heel them out, I can push them away from me without them thinking they should disconnect and leave. Okay, that's really, really important as we start to build distance, building up to, let's say, Liberty circles, them going around me versus just with me in hand at my shoulder. So again, if I go to move her out, good. If I speed my feet up, she should speed up. If she doesn't, again, I can come overhand, hit the gas pedal, good. I slow down. So that's something that I'll spend a lot of time in the beginning just teaching them, find my shoulder and stay at my shoulder. This is the sweet spot. Then we can start to build up to going out into Liberty Circle. So this position here leads into what I would call my neutral position, Liberty Circle. So I'm still parallel. So when I'm in hand here, I'm parallel to her. If I angle and I draw my shoulders in, she should draw. If I step out, she should let heel out. So same principles apply, but I start to get to where I have my lips in between us, and we have a little more distance between us. So I can still, okay. She still should want to default to coming back to my shoulder. Good. But I can start to send her out a little farther. Good. Try. Good. She wants to smell everything in the dirt. Good. And the other thing to keep in mind when we're talking about that sweet spot, just like when we're riding, we always hear about being quiet with our hands and legs and releasing when the horse is where we want them to be. We have to keep in mind to be consistent and quiet with our whips when we're either in a circle like this or working in hand. And so if my whips are jumping around, snapping up and down, flicking around, moving with my body, it's going to cause a lot of mixed signals. Whereas now, if I raise it, it means speed up. If I go underhand, under hind quarter, go ahead. That should mean turn in a bit. Go ahead. I'll do a lot of kind of square corners to where I go forward, drive with this back whip, turn, and go forward. Turn, and go forward. So that they learn I can drive with the whip, but then release happens by coming in. Go ahead. And go forward, and push with the whip. Go ahead. Especially in the beginning stages, I can help clarify a bit by bringing this front whip up here, gonna close this door, go ahead. And then when she comes in, I'll take that away. I think of it similarly to going to your legs first and then your hands when you're riding, your legs and then your reins. So if I go to her hind quarter, then her face and her chest, good. Then coming back on this circle, good, step up. The faster I move with my feet, the faster she should move. Good. I slow down a bit. All right. Up, done. Wow. Good. And of course, we'll get into verbal cues. Once they start to understand the physical cues, up front. Good. Sorry, step up. Good. If I have a horse that's really struggling on these circles in the beginning, I might even slip my whips to the other side, reach back to her hip, step this way. Come. And it's kind of a, hey, come catch my shoulder, catch me if you can. Come on. It's all right. That's it. Come on. Go ahead. And when she gets up here, I'll relax a bit, rub her on the neck, get to where she looks to come find that. Good. As we're going around. So in the beginning, we'll spend a lot of time ending like that. Up top. So that's where they're seeking to go to. Step up. Go ahead. My carriage whip can talk to her shoulder here if I need to, or the rib cage if I need to move her out a bit. Yeah. The other thing I want to start to build in as we go along, I do want my whips to ask for a response. All right. Give a turn here and a turn. But I also, again, in motion, I want them to get to where if I just flick that whip up over her back and my body doesn't change and my voice doesn't ask for something different, that she can just cruise around there with that. Again, I won't do as much of that with a more dull, quiet horse, but I want them to learn. Sometimes they can get so dialed into thinking every time that whip moves, we've got to change something. And they get a little mentally frazzled to where if they can just, that can be kind of again, a default relax cue. Sorry, step up. Now I can ask for more forward. Step up. Good. Step. Good. Try to keep my circle consistent. Step. That's it. Just kind of let her cruise around in the lobe here. Go ahead. If I want more forward, my back whip comes up. That's it. Good. Again, if she's where I want her, which she is, step up. I want to be quiet with those wings. Good. The farther away we go and the faster we go, the difficulty, Zara, exponentially increases for them to stay connected. So it's an incremental build when I slowly start to build distance. But in the beginning, I'll always, like I said, finish by them coming back in closer. I'll teach my horses to come to a whistle. Good. Well, and when she comes in close, she's at the level. We don't have to stop every time she comes in, but I might let her come down to the walk. Step her up into the low. Good. Now she's wanting to be close. Good. I'll move her out a bit. Push on that rib cage. Good. Step up. For a little speed. Good. And come. Everybody likes it when Zara goes fast. So that's a big thing. If I finish speed with her coming in, as I'm pushing, she's thinking, okay, but the game is still, the reward happens by coming in here, okay? So I'm going to go this direction, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about maintaining focus in different environments and having an end cue. That's a big thing that can be helpful. Sorry. Step up. You're not that tired. Good. Good. My voice, my body, then my whip. Hey, where are you going? Zara. Good. So there she's drifting a little bit. Good. So I'll do some inside turns. I don't want them to be smooth. I don't want them to be too sharp. Step. Good. Good. Step up. Good. Walk on. Beautiful. And I just let her flow down into that walk for a second. Say, I appreciate those turns. You're staying a little more connected. Good. Step. Step. Let's go. That's it. Good. Come. Good. There we go. You can clap if you like it. She needs clapping and cheering. Good. Someday, I'd like her to be joining my other guys out here in the night show. She's done a little bit of that, but not as much. So that's good for her to get used to that. Good. So, lastly, a big question, people ask about keeping their horses focused, and I can speak from experience. All I had to practice on was a little dirt grass paddock at home in the pasture. You want to talk about keeping your horses focused, work on grass at liberty, okay? So a big thing that I had to learn was everything has to be consistent. So if I'm leading my horses somewhere across a grass area, they don't just dive down any grass whenever. If I don't initiate it, they don't go down and eat. But that being said, I'm not just this dictator over here that says you're never going to do anything. So if I want to give them a mental break, I will initiate it. I'll point them down to the grass and I'll let them go eat, or I'll release them to go off and do their thing, okay? Rather than, for something to be maintained and be consistent, there needs to be a clear start request and a clear end request. So for my horses, if I don't specifically say, stop staying focused and dialed in, eventually the goal is they don't even think about not staying dialed in. Like there's not an option unless I send them off. So the other way, let's say I bring them out, and I don't like to do it every time I come out to work because I don't want them to think the expectation is we have to come out and buck and kick and run and roll and goof off every day before we go to work. If they've been turned out, which I try to let my horses get turned out as much as I can, weather dependent and whether we're at shows and stuff, if they've been turned out and that kind of thing, I want them to come out and pretty much be able to go to work. Then I might send them off to do their thing. If they've been cooped up, if the weather's bad, whatever the case may be, I want to be realistic and set them up for success. So if I'm done, or I want to give them a break, I'm going to very clearly send them off. Hold on. And I'll make it very clear, but very loose. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be kind of almost sloppy, because anytime I'm really accurate with the whip in my body, I want that to be a cue for connecting and focusing. And so I'll send her off. Now here I am asking for a certain level of connection still, because I'm still communicating here. Good. Gives her a chance to kind of go be playful. And it also can be a little bit of reverse psychology. There you go. If they get to where they really want to leave a lot, they can be like, hey, let's make a game out of this. How about I initiate it? Easy. That's one of her favorite games, and then she gets really excited, and then we gotta relax again. Good. There we go. Okay. One more. There we go. Good. And then I gotta make sure we come down to relaxation again after that, because that winds it up really high, being able to be driven that hard, running that fast, call back in. The rear is hands down one of the most intense maneuvers, and other things can very quickly fall apart from a technical aspect, or obviously there's the safety aspect. I see people trying to teach that rear way too soon. So I want to make sure she comes back down and relaxes afterwards. So I hope you guys found that helpful. We do have a booth in here. If you want to come check out more about what I do, or just come over and say hi. We'll be out here tonight in the night show, and tomorrow morning again, I think at 10 o'clock, around there. Thanks for coming out.